Okay, it's October 2nd, 2020. Sitting here with Dad, aka Marvin Langstein. Just gonna ask you some questions, be real conversational, and use your normal animation and charm. So, first one is where and when were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York, in March 21, 1931. Seems like yesterday.
What street?
675 Dorset Street in the Bronx.
Okay. And when you were a kid, did you happen to have a nickname?
Moshe.
Moshe?
Moshe.
Your
Or
Hebrew name?
Mosh.
Your Hebrew name?
Hmm?
Your Hebrew name?
That was my Jewish name.
Yeah, okay. And what hospital were you born in?
Prospect Hospital in the Bronx.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your parents.
What about him?
Um, Sam and Shirley, where they were born. Maybe a little bit about their siblings.
My father was born in Austria, and my mother was born in the Bronx.
And how did they meet?
I'm not sure. I think she told me once, but I forgot.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
Grandpa Sam had an interesting story. I think was it true that he fought in World War One?
Yes,
On which side?
Germany, because he was in Austria, and that was it.
Was there a story about him ever, like how he got out of serving by sticking his hands in
Not
frozen
really.
water?
He used to tell stories about it, but not that much.
Okay. And how many brothers did Grandpa Sam have, and what were their names?
Yeah, I believe 6 brothers. So it'd be Sam, Mo, Dave, Ben, Harry, and Zach. And he had 6 sisters. It was Fanny, Annie, Sadie, Hilda, Ray, and Hilda.
Okay, and I think you just told me a story about how his youngest brother Mo
Yeah.
passed away at a very young age. Right?
I forgot how young he was, but he was the youngest one of the family.
Maybe in his 30s or his late 20s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe younger.
And what was your relationship with your parents?
With who?
Your parents.
I was his son.
Well said. Okay, but you were very close. You never fought.
I was the first born, so I used to be the king there.
And who followed you?
My brother, no, my sister Helene, 2 years later, and then 2 years later, Sydney, and 3 years later, Linda.
Okay, and tell me about your childhood.
What about my childhood? Well, I had a lot of fun. We never went to a restaurant, never, because we were kosher. My mother did all the cooking. And we used to play in the street like any other kid in the Bronx at that time. There weren't that many cars on the block. We used to play stickball in the street, and I liked showing off because at the end of the street there was a couple of apartment buildings, and I used to tell my friends to throw the ball. I'd go running out to make a big catch. I wanted to be Joe DiMaggio, and I became a Yankee fan when I was like 9 years old, and I used to read the paper, and used to go to the library and read a lot of fairy tales. That was my first book until somebody sent me for my birthday an adult book of Mice and Men, and I read it. And then I started going to the library in the adult section, and I was reading all the time. Maybe when I was 11 years old, I belonged to 3 book clubs, and every month they would send me a copy, and I was supposed to send it back if I didn't want it. I ended up paying for it. My mother would pay for it, and played a lot of ball, stickball and softball around the block. I had to school around the block. I used to walk to school. I was there from kindergarten to ninth grade. And the story about the first day I went to kindergarten, my mother never told me that I was going to school. Not that I remember. And she just walked me around the block, and she brings me over to this classroom, and she starts walking away. I see she's walking out the door. I start crying, and the principal was there. It was kindergarten. The principal was there. He says, "I'll take care of him." As soon as my mother walked out the door, he comes over to me and slaps me in the face. And I went inside there and I sat down. We all had a separate little table in front of us, and just one person sitting at a chair and a table. It was spread around the room like that. And I urinated. And I used to do that every day like that, and then move my chair away. I didn't know how to go to the bathroom with the other kids until finally I went there and I stopped doing that.
Was that around 6th or 7th grade?
No, 6th, 7th. It was kindergarten.
I mean, when you learned how to use the restroom.
I want to say something else, but I'm not going to say it. Okay.
So, what about? It's a crazy story about the principal hitting you, and I don't think that was your first time that you had a little bit of a challenge with an authority figure. Can you tell me a little bit about the relationship you had with your rabbi when you were getting bar mitzvah in Hebrew school?
Well, he used to slap me. He was the rabbi for Alcatraz. He was. And he was very rough and tough. His name was Rabbi Katz. And I told my mother, this is leading up to my bar mitzvah, I told my mother I don't want to go to see him anymore. So I went to another temple, Rabbi Halberstadt, I think his name was, and I liked him because a friend of mine from school was the same age as me, and he's going to be bar mitzvah at the same time. And this rabbi was older, and he used to fall asleep there, and then we would stop and talk to each other, you know. He was a nice guy, though. And that's where I got bar mitzvah.
Okay, and what are your fondest childhood memories? I know reading sounded like one of them. Maybe sports.
Yeah, read baseball, being a Yankee fan, going to the movies. My father used to get passes for the movies, so my mother and father never went together, but they would go separately, and I would go along many times, not every time, but they would take me, and I saw some of the greatest pictures at that time, and I liked it then, you know.
And why would they not go together?
Because somebody had to stay home and watch the other kids.
Because you were older. Got it. Okay. And when you were a kid, you were raised in a kosher household.
Yes.
What's the first time you remember eating non-kosher food?
When I was 14, I believe, my friend that lived across the street, Herbie, and I think we all took a quarter and went to get a whole pizza for 50 cents. And my Aunt Rosin had told me, the first time you eat it, you have to throw up. So we were eating it, and I remember it was so hot that it was burning my palate. I wasn't used to it, but it tasted good. And I said to my friend, we have to throw up after this, but we didn't throw up. And that was the first time I had non-kosher. I didn't tell my mother.
What would have happened if you told her?
I don't know. I never told her.
You talked a lot about having fun as a kid.
A lot of.
What were the responsibilities or the expectations of you at home, like around helping in the house or chores?
I was supposed to go to the store and help my father. He owned a glass store with his brother, and he always wanted me to come over. And I used to go out and play. As soon as I came home from school, I'd grab a glass of milk and cookies, which my mother made great cookies, and run outside and play ball with my friend. And then he would come home, and he'd come home and say, "Where's that bum?" And I'd be hiding under the bed, and he used to take off his belt and get me under the bed.
And what do you do with the belt?
He hit me with it, with the buckle.
On your butt?
No, whatever he could get, just one like that, whatever he could get.
And
So one time he hit me on my knee, and my mother had to take me to the doctor, and it healed up.
did you then come in and help him, or did you ever show
Oh,
up?
I used to go there sometimes. Sometimes I would help him carry the glass, but on Saturdays, my mother would come down sometimes to do it, and other times I would take over and take orders or give out some glass or shades that somebody came in for. But I wasn't slated for glass.
Was he still working on Shabbat?
Was he? No.
He took Shabbat?
Oh yeah. On Saturday he did. Yeah.
Okay, but he was very religious in other ways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, he wore tefillin.
He just would fill it on
Wrap tefillin.
every morning. I did until I was 14 years old. I don't know how to do it now.
Do you remember any favorite meals as a kid? Any favorite foods?
There was a lot of favorite foods that I'd like to have now, but I rebelled at that time. I wanted different recipes. So I used to argue with my mother that I'd see a movie and say, "Look, I want to eat that," you know. So she used to try to make it with it being kosher, not to put in some of the ingredients. And I gave her a hard time then. My brothers and sisters never did. I was the one that always wanted something different.
Okay, and everybody liked your mom's cookies. Grandma Shirley's cookies are
Yep.
still legendary.
She used to make big batches of them, 3 or 4 different kinds.
She never complained about being in the kitchen, which I still can't figure out.
No, never.
Unbelievable. Okay. When you were a kid, were there these big family dinners, like with relatives over all the time, just like when I was a kid?
At holidays, we used to have, and sometimes my father would bring home an orphan. He used to do this a lot of holidays, and they'd sleep over, and then the next day or 2 days later they would leave. He would take them to where he got them. I didn't know them at all.
So it was just like a way to help out a little bit.
Huh?
It's a way to just look out for these.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Yankees earlier. Can you touch on your run-in with the Babe?
You want that story again? I think it was 1944, 46, 46. I don't know. I was riding my bicycle in Long Beach. We were there for the summer. And I went past a restaurant there. And my cousin, who was a waiter in there, my cousin Leo, walked out. He saw me. He said, "Get me some paper. Babe Ruth is eating in there. I'll get his autograph." So I ran across the street and I got a penny postcard. It was a penny then. And he took the postcard and I got Babe Ruth on it, just Babe Ruth. And he walked out with his wife and daughter, and his car was parked there in front of the place. He had 2 flats, and he takes off his jacket and rolls up his sleeves and then walks across the street to a gas station and tells them to fix his tires. So they took out the tires and fixed one of them, and then he left. By this time, there were other kids around there. I said, "That's Babe Ruth," and I think he died a year later. And I kept that autograph for many, many years. And I don't know, about say 10 years ago or less, I sold it for, I think it was $1,400. And then I went on the computer and I saw some of them were selling it for over $10,000.
Yeah, he's not around to sign those anymore, is he? Okay, so what about, can you tell me a tiny bit about your relationship with your siblings? When you were a kid, I mean, were you guys, I think you were a very close-knit family.
Yeah, I was close. But we were always fighting at the table. It was always hectic. And, carrying on, you touched me and all that, the usual stuff. And when I used to come home from school and I ran outside, I saw my friend was there, my friend Artie. So we used to play ball all the time. So I told my brother, Sid, go upstairs and get my glove. I was always ordering him around. He used to run up and get it for me. We still kid each other about that. I tell him to get my glove. I threw out my glove like 20 years ago. It was so small, you know. He said, "You still don't have it." I padded it up with a cloth and everything. So I used to use it and catch it with my sister, Linda, who was a very good baseball player. She was like throwing the ball to a man. She threw it hard, and she reached up. She was tall. She reached up and catch the ball. So I'd love to go play it with her in Long Beach, in front of the house there. Every time I visited, I used to say, "Come on, let's play outside."
I remember that glove. It was the old school one with the fingers that instead of all the webbing that you have now. It's amazing they could catch.
It was a Pete Reiser glove, who was the first baseman for the Dodgers in 1941.
Okay, so let's shift gears to a little bit later in life when you had an interest in music and you were writing songs. How did that happen, and can you tell me about it? Any of your
Well, my mother had a piano, and I sat down on there and tried to play. And I used to play with one finger. My mother had a lot of music sheets of old songs and new songs. She used to buy them and play the piano all the time. And I used to stand next to her and sing. I would sing, she was playing. And then I sat down and I started composing some songs. And I just did like with one finger. I heard later that Irving Berlin did that, but he had more talent than me. And I actually I had them patented, and I found somebody who was going to record it for me. And I had them recorded, and this guy got the singer who was more like an opera singer. He was ruining my songs, but I think I paid him $10. I don't know. I mean, everything was cheap then. I was in the Brill building, which was a big building on Broadway, and that's where all the publishers were there. So I took two of the albums over, two of the records over, and I went from the ground floor up. Every one said publishing, and finally one lady said, "No, this isn't bad. Can I keep it overnight? Or can I keep it, So she kept it, but then she said, "No, she can't use it." She says I was good for Broadway, not for popular songs. And little by little, it faded away.
And I can remember a couple of them. Like, what were your favorites that you did?
Escape. I forgot some of the names now.
Please. Then there was the old please man, policeman.
What?
Please man, policeman.
No.
Don't give me no ticket.
No.
Um,
5'2", eyes are blue. I didn't do that. I used to sing it. I sang it with all the kids on my toes. They would sing on my toes.
What was the so? What was the one you mentioned? How did that song go?
Escape.
More.
It was a song that I imagined Frankie Lane, who was the big singer at the time, singing. It was his type of song, but I didn't like the way the guy sung it. It's not how I imagined it. And that's it. It faded away.
Okay.
In fact, the first year we moved to Long Beach, we had the upstairs rented. It was rented to Jan Murray, who later on had a show on TV called something Who Wants to Write a Song, something like that. I was tempted to send it in to him, so I used to go swimming with him in the ocean. And he was working in Lamont-Neek, in a nightclub in New York at the time, and I used to go upstairs because they had a radio, we didn't, and I used to listen to the Yankee game there. And his wife was very nice. She was an ex-dancer also. And a year later, she had a son. And a year later, I see a picture on the front page that she's getting a divorce from him because he was cheating on her in Lamont-Neek that summer. And he ended up marrying her and had a couple of kids with her too. And he became a fairly well-known comedian.
Comedian or?
Comedian.
Okay. Did you ever go see him at Lamont-Neek? Okay, so
no,
you were
I was
too
a
young.
kid.
Got it.
I was going to go to Broadway.
So this is a great segue. So you said you went there to listen on the radio. When did your family get your first TV?
When we first moved to Long Beach permanently, it was 1948. So I was tired of looking into bar windows to see the games or the fights. Joe Louis was always fighting. And I took my mother into getting one. And my father was yelling bloody murder. It was a 16-inch RCA, a big cabinet. And the first day over, my two uncles that lived across the street came in. My mother put chairs down, and we watched a fight. And not a fight, a wrestling. My father used to love wrestlers. He always put wrestlers on. And that was our first TV.
16-inch
16
screen.
inch, yeah.
And that was probably pretty expensive back then.
It was more expensive than getting a 65-inch screen now.
It's crazy. So the whole cabinet and everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you remember when you guys got your first color, or did that?
My first what?
First color TV, like when?
That was the TV.
But that was black and white.
Yeah. The color?
Yeah. Late 60s or early 70s?
I forgot. The when we had it, Channel 4, which was NBC, would have the peacock come up with all the colors, to show it's a color TV.
As a kid, did you have an opportunity to earn or get an allowance?
I don't remember that I had an allowance, but I used to ask for money, and 10 cents ice cream or 5 cents ice cream or 10 cents for the movies. So it wasn't that much at the time.
So you were able to get what you needed. Tell me a little bit about your first car.
My first what?
Car.
My first car was a 1951 Mercury. And I was a lousy student. I didn't have anybody drive me, but my Uncle Norman was out there that summer, and he used to drive me. I used to drive with him, and then I took my test. I failed it. I went down the block and I went through this first stop sign. The second time I failed it, he told me to back up, and I couldn't park the car backing up. And the third time I passed it, and at that time I was a little wary about the car. I didn't was in it, hardly in it, and when the license came through the mail, I right away I told my mother and sisters, come on in the car. My brother and I drove to Hempstead, which was like 10 miles away, no trouble, you know. And all of a sudden, I was the only one in in that family that was driving a car.
So Grandpa Sam didn't have a car.
He had a picture on the wall of him with a car, but whether he drove it, I don't know. And my mother had a license also, but she never drove.
So how would he get to work from Long Beach when you guys were living there? How would he?
He worked with his brother Dave, and we lived within walking distance of the store, so he used to walk there. But then Dave moved to Long Beach, 1943. So they invited me over for like 2 weeks. I said, "Wow, the beach is down the block. It's paradise, you know. I'm swimming all the time." So I came home and I was crying. Why don't we move there, you know? And so my father went down there in '44 and bought a house there for $6,700. My uncle before that bought it across the street for like in the 5,000s. Everything was cheap then. They were all summer houses. When we finally moved there in '48, there was only one other person on the block. All the other houses were boarded up, and I hated it. And after a while, I found friends a couple of blocks away, and I loved it. I hated when the people came out after Memorial Day. Had the beach to myself. Used to take my dog down to the beach and let her run loose, you know. And I loved it. We used to play football in the street. There was nobody else there, just us kids. None of the stores were open. You had to walk into town, which was a big walk, but we used to do it. It was when people came at is it Memorial Day? Yeah, and they start opening up the windows, taking the wood off the windows. I hated it. We used to sit on the porch and watch the cars piling up. And as soon as Labor Day came, they would disappear and we had the place to ourselves again. But now everybody lives there. It's no summer houses anymore.
Were the roads all paved back then? Or
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned your dog. I know Lucky was a big part of your childhood.
A little black dog. I got her the day before my bar mitzvah. It wasn't that they told me to go pick out a dog, but there was a girl that lived next door who had a dog called Blackie, and she got impregnated by this monster across the street. It was a bad dog, and it used to bite all the time. So when Lucky was born, she was given to somebody, and they didn't want her because she was a little vicious. So I didn't know. There was Blackie's daughter, and I thought it would be as calm as Blackie was. So I brought her home, and my mother said, "Okay, keep her." But when my father came home, he says, "Get her out of here," you know. But so the first day I was playing with my friend Herbie. We were throwing the ball from my room to the kitchen, and she jumped up. She used to jump up high and grabbed the ball, but as she's grabbing the ball, she bit me. So that was it. I was afraid of her already. And a couple of days later, we fell in love. And I used to come home from school, and there was an apartment building on the other side of me in the backyard. I used to throw the ball against the wall there, and she would jump up in the air, catch it, run away, and then come back and drop it at my feet. We used to play like that in the afternoon all the time. And I loved that dog. And I stopped her from biting me by grabbing her teeth on the bottom and pulling her jaw down so she couldn't bite me. But she bit like 3 people, had to bring her to the ASPCA. They said, she bites one more person, we have to put her away, you know? And this is, I used to walk her with a leash, but she looked like an angel. But then somebody would come and say, what a cute dog. And all of a sudden her mouth would open like a crocodile.
And this was this was happening. This was in the Bronx, or
The
this
Bronx,
was
yeah. She didn't bite anybody there because there wasn't too many people there.
got it. Okay, and then um, you mentioned some friends. Did you have a best friend as a kid, or
Arthur Kornhaber. Now he lives in where the kids go to camp.
oh,
I told you, yeah. And he's a very successful children's psychiatrist or psychologist. He's on the computer.
have you guys connected at all? No.
Never connected.
When did you guys last talk?
When I moved, 48.
Okay.
We were friends for like 5 years, 4 years. We used to go to the 92nd Street Y on Sundays and go swimming there. And we had a club there called the Maccabees. I bet was the gang, my cousin Harvey, and some other guys that were in a club, the Maccabees. And little by little, we drifted away. We moved away, and that was it.
What about and we're almost done because you're doing a great job. We're cutting through this stuff. Just some fun questions. Like, was there like ever a most embarrassing thing that you ever did as a kid that you remember? I mean, the kindergarten pee-pee story is pretty good, but was there one that ever?
That wasn't embarrassing. I just did it.
Anything that pops out as like maybe one of your most embarrassing things that you did as?
I don't remember.
No, okay. And what about, tell me about high school for you. Was high school like a good experience? Was it?
No. I didn't go to a nice school.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
I don't want to sound racist.
But it was pretty inner city.
Yeah.
And you used to get bullied a little bit, maybe?
I what?
Was there some bullying back then? Fights? Or,
no.
But it just wasn't, you didn't find your people? Were you involved in any student organizations, clubs, sports?
No, it wasn't like that.
And what was the name of the high school?
Morris High School.
And
that's where a famous black general went to. What is it, Powell?
Colin Powell?
Yeah, he went there.
And this is in the Bronx. You graduated from there. Got it.
I skipped a term. I took a couple of credits, so I finished high school in 2.5 years.
And then when you got out of high school, what was your plan then? What was your first job?
I was more or less a bum. But let's see, my first job, I had summer jobs working in a hardware store for 2 years. And before that, I was delivering groceries from in the summertime from a store. And then I got a job in, my cousin Sid worked in a children's clothing store in Upper Manhattan. So he got me a job there. I went from Long Beach on the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan just to work in their like shipping department. And I stayed there a couple of years and then I left.
So at what point did you buy the car? Like, how did you earn the money to buy the car?
It wasn't my money. My mother and father bought it for me.
Really?
It was $2,100. a new Mercury new Mercury.
So they bought you a brand new car, and you were how old?
21.
It's amazing. Was that like part of a birthday present, or?
No, I guess they wanted somebody to drive them.
Okay, so they bought a car and they got a built-in driver, but it was your
I-
car or was it a family car?
It was my car. Nobody else drove. They were all younger than me. And then my brother was going to high school, and he won a car in a raffle. You had to buy $1 worth of stuff, and they gave you a ticket. So he bought something in a camera store for $1 or something like that. And all of a sudden they called us up on a Saturday night. They had the drawing in the movie theater in Long Beach. And they said, "You won the car." And it was a Nash Rambler, one of the first small compact cars. And it was a standard shift, 2-door, the basic car. And the first day he takes it to school, he comes home with the car was packed up with girls, packed up. I couldn't believe how many walked out of there. And so he drove that for a long time. Then my sister Linda drove it. And it was a lot of fun those days.
All right. Last question will be, I guess, or maybe we'll continue this tomorrow, but last question is, who was your childhood role model? Like if you had
Who was my childhood who?
Role model.
Role model?
Yeah. Did you have somebody that you admired or wanted to be like, or was your beacon?
Not really.
Maybe an athlete? Could that have been like baseball or?
I could have been center field on the Yankees. I don't know. I used to go to Yankee Stadium almost every Sunday. They had a doubleheader, and my mother would pack me a salami sandwich or something like that. It was all kosher. And by the second inning of the first game, I couldn't talk anymore. I was hoarse. I'd be yelling out, sometimes I would go with a friend or a cousin, but most of the time I went by myself. I'd take the train and get over there, and I loved it. When the game was over, you could run out on the field. So I used to run out there and they believe it, thinking I was Joe DiMaggio, And I loved going there. I used to come home all sunburned.
How old were you when you were going by yourself?
I took the train. I don't know, it could have been, it was in the Bronx. It could have been 13, 14.
Wow. It's amazing.
It's easy to take the train then. It was safe. Everything was safe. I went to the library. I walked through a black neighborhood and nobody bothered me. I used to walk to the library was there. And I used to, once in a while when I went to the Yankee Stadium, instead of taking a 5 cents trolley or a bus, I forgot what it was, or the train, I used to walk from there to my house. And it was a long walk, but walked through their neighborhood. Nobody bothered me then. It wasn't like that, it was different. And many times I'd walk with my cousin Harvey. My father used to get tickets for the firemen and the policemen used to play. They don't do it anymore. So we used to get tickets for that, and we'd fill up our pockets with soda bottles for 5 cents deposit. And on the way home, if we walked, little by little, we'd drop it off. By the time we got home, we had one bottle. It was too much to carry. Never had a bag to put it in. But it was a lot of fun. Used to do a lot of walking.
So they had soda bottles in the stadium,
Yeah.
right? Can you imagine that now?
I know. Well, they stopped it because...
Did you ever see anybody throwing them?
I don't remember that, but it's not like years later when they hit players with it.
Yeah.
That's why they don't have anymore.
You could probably have some broken glass, I guess, if people...
Yeah.
Okay, this was great. I want to thank you for all this. It was really fun to hear these stories.
Let me get a drink. I'm dry as a bone.